This morning I'm going to tell you a story. I want you to open up with me in your Bibles to the book of Genesis. We're going to be looking at passages in chapter 28, chapter 32. So we want to mark those as we get started this morning. If I were to title this message, I would say, "What's in a Name?" What's in a name? My family, our names, we've got family names. All of my kids have family names, all three of them. My first name is William, it means protector. My middle name is Curtis, which means courteous. Alex's first name is Alexander, which means leader of men. Billy's first name is William, which means protector. Curtis's first name means courteous, as I said before. Our names mean things. Now, in this day and society, names, people don't quite put as much thought in terms of the meaning of a name as they used to. They pick what sounds good, what's trendy at the time. Or you could be like us, when we picked our kids' names, we really weren't thinking about what they meant. We were picking family names, right? I was selfish and wanted both of my first two to be named after me. So one's Curtis and the other one's William, right? So there was no particular thought given to what those names meant, just that I'm egotistical and need to be reminded of how awesome I am on a regular basis. So we just, we picked family names. But in the time of the Bible, names meant things. Many times a child will be named based on what God told them to name the child. There were times when God changed the names of people, like Abram to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah, right? There were times when parents gave their names to their children that you can't figure out why they named their children that, like Jabez, which means he shall cause pain, because he was named that because he caused his mom pain in childbirth. So his whole life, he got called Jabez, which was, hey, buddy, you brought me pain. Right? Reminded every day of how much pain that he brought. But names meant things. They carried with them a weight of blessing or cursing. They really did. They meant something. And today I want to tell you the story of a young man that you've heard his name mentioned over and over again. If you've been in church any amount of time, his name is Jacob. God really laid this on my heart this week as I was going through and doing my devotion. He just laid this particular passage, this story on my heart, so I'm trusting God that it means something to someone today. Because Jacob had the greatest name change that you could possibly imagine. For you that do not know, Jacob means deceiver or usurper. Not a very cool name to have. That every time your mom or your dad called your name, they were calling you a deceiver. Right? My dad's pet name for me growing up was Idget. Right? If he was showing me love or care, or he was aggravating me, whatever it was, my pet name was Idget. Can you imagine if your name was deceiver, usurper? You were speaking that over your child's life every time you called him by name. But that's how Jacob lived his childhood. We know the story that his mom, Rebecca, had twins, Esau and Jacob. Esau was born first. They were not identical twins. Esau was born first. He was hairy and he was all Superman, right? He was a man that lived off the land, and he was a hunter and a gatherer and super macho, right? And then there was Jacob, who, when I picture Jacob, I picture a frail, pasty white. You know what I'm talking about? They're just in my mind, because there's this juxtaposition between these two. The Bible clearly states that Esau was a hunter-gatherer, manly man's man. Jacob was a mama's boy who stayed at home, that didn't like to get his hands dirty or break a fingernail. I mean, that is, he was not like his brother. And when they were born, Esau came out, but as Esau was being born, literally the Bible says Jacob had him by the heel. So that as they pulled Esau out, Jacob came out too, holding Esau by the heel, which is why they named him usurper. Jacob, he was from the womb fighting with his brother. Right? He wanted to be first. He was trying to get out first. And he wasn't going to be left behind. And so Jacob is named that name because of the way that he was born. And Esau was the favorite of Isaac. And Jacob was the favorite of his mama, Rebekah. Right? And so they lived their lives this way. You guys probably know the story. It came time to bless the children. Isaac was getting very far advanced in age. He was losing his sight. He didn't have much time left upon this earth. So he said, Esau, go out, prepare me some delicious food, come back, and I'm going to bless you. Well, Rachel, or Rebekah, did not want Esau to be blessed. She wanted Jacob to be blessed. So she did the whole deceiving thing, living right up to his name, and had him pretend to be Esau and go in and serve his dad food, and he stole Esau's blessing. This made Esau a little upset, as you can imagine. And so Esau pledged that he was going to kill his brother. He said, I'm going to wait until Dad dies. He ain't got much longer anyways. And when Dad dies, I'm killing him. He took what was mine. I'm going to take it back by force. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm meaner, I'm tougher. That little thing thinks he's going to take what belongs to me. Not a chance. That is exactly what Esau was thinking. And so he plans that as soon as Isaac dies, he's going to kill his brother and take back that which belonged to him as the firstborn son. His mama hears word of what Esau's planning. So she says to Jacob, listen, your brother's going to kill you. He's bad, he's angry, he wants revenge. So this is what I want you to do. Pack up your things, and I want you to go to my relative's house, Laban. And I want you to go and live there for a while until Esau calms down. When he calms down, everything will be okay. He'll forgive you. You can come home. Well, Jacob will learn, did not think Esau was going to forgive him. And didn't think things would ever be right between them again. So Jacob does as his mother instructs him, the deceiver, the usurper, and he goes to make his way to Laban. And if you look with me in Genesis chapter 28, let's look at verse 10. Turn to it here. I forgot to mark 28 this morning. There we go. If you look with me at verse 10. Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And so he came to a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of the place, he put it in his head, and he lay down in the place to sleep. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, the God of Isaac. The land of which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and the south. And you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And behold, I am with you and keep you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Then Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had and put it his head. And he set it as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city had been Luz previously. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. You say, well, why are you reading that? Because this is important. Jacob set out to go to his mom's relative's house later. As he's traveling, he decides he's going to take a rest. He's going to sleep for the night. So he lays down, he takes a stone, lays his head upon it to lean on it, and he goes to sleep. And as he's sleeping, he never called upon God. He never prayed. As he's sleeping there, running from his brother, God shows him in a dream a ladder. More probably like a staircase, to be honest with you. A staircase that reached from earth to heaven. And he saw angels going up and angels coming down. And God was at the top, and God said, Jacob, this is my promise to you. I promise you that your seed, just like Abraham and Isaac, is going to spread. You'll have children and family. You're going to impact this earth forever. I'm going to bless you and multiply you. He said, and this land where you are laying, it's yours. And it is your descendants forever. This ladder, this staircase that Jacob saw, was showing him that no matter how the world saw him, God intervened on behalf of what was happening in the world. He had angels and servants going up and going down the staircase, involving themselves in the affairs of man. This was personal to Jacob. He was showing Jacob, Jacob, I am heavily involved in your life and in what happens in this world. Why? Because Jacob was about to enter a whole new struggle. He struggled because he was not the favorite of his father. He struggled against his brother Esau because he stole from his brother Esau. Now he was about to enter a whole new struggle. Now I want you to pay attention here, and we're going to look at this more in a moment. Jacob prayed. Jacob does not pray again until Genesis chapter 32. Now the important part here is that there's over 20 years of time passed between chapter 28 and chapter 32. There is no recorded time of everything that Jacob went through, all the details given of what he faced under his uncle, nothing given that he ever called upon God until chapter 32. So let's talk about what happens. He goes to his uncle. He's going to work for his uncle. He says, Uncle, your daughter Rachel is quite the beautiful woman, and I want her to be my wife. His uncle says, all right, you work for me these X amount of years, she'll be yours. He works the years, he works hard. He comes time to get Rachel. Guess what? He gets the ugly one, Leah. The one, the oldest, the one that he did not want. He was what? Deceived. So now the deceiver is deceived. The usurper has now been lied to and taken advantage of. So he says, look, what have you done? You lied to me. The uncle says, well, sorry, man. I got to marry the older one before the younger one. Right? So Jacob says, all right, what do I got to do? And the uncle says, work for me these X amount of years, and Rachel will be yours. So he works for the uncle, and he finally has Rachel for his wife. He's got Leah and Rachel now as his wives. That is not where the uncle's treachery ends. As God began to bless Jacob and multiply, the uncle made a deal with Jacob that he could have certain livestock from his possession. The uncle thought he was being crafty. He was giving him the one with blemishes. Dots, stripes, whatever the case may be. And no matter what the uncle did to change the terms of their contract, God always blessed what was given to Jacob, so that his possessions multiplied greater than the uncle's. The uncle didn't like this. The Bible says that the uncle no longer looked favorably upon Jacob, to the point that as we get to Genesis chapter 32, Jacob has to run from his uncle. His uncle is not a happy camper, because the uncle sees it as that Jacob stole from him. He stole his cattle, his livestock, and he stole his daughters, and he stole his grandchildren, and he was leaving. So the uncle gets together as Jacob flees by cover of night. Once the uncle realizes he's left, the uncle gets all this stuff together, Laban, and says, I'm getting my stuff back. I'm getting my daughters, I'm getting my grandkids, I'm getting my livestock that you've taken, I'm getting the precious valuables that you stole from me. Rachel had taken his idols that were very valuable in his house. She had stolen those. And he goes after Jacob. Jacob hears him coming, and they have a confrontation. And Jacob just looks at his uncle and says, Uncle, you robbed me. You kept changing the terms of my contract. You deceived me with Leah. And then on top of that, when God multiplied the livestock for me, you changed the terms of the contract again. Every single time. And God, everything I have, you actually gave me according to the deal that we made. I stole nothing from you. Didn't steal your daughters. I didn't steal your grandchildren. I didn't steal anything from you. So they make a deal there. That as long as Laban stays on this side of the line, and Jacob stays on this side of the line, no harm will be done to each other. Right. As long as Laban stayed on his side, and Jacob stayed on his side, they would be at peace. That's the deal that they made. God told Laban, don't touch Jacob. So Laban's hands were tied. So now we find ourselves in 32. So now Jacob has struggled against what? His dad. He struggled against Esau. He struggled against his uncle. He struggled with his wives because Leah hates Rachel. Because Jacob clearly that was a whole problem in that family. My goodness gracious. But Jacob favored Rachel over Leah. I know I'm getting somewhere. Just bear with me. He favored Rachel over Leah, so he struggled with his wives because of the jealousy there and the constant infighting there. And Leah started popping out children one right after the other, and Rachel was barren. And so Leah would make fun of Rachel and condemn Rachel because she could not have children. I mean, it was a nasty mess. He was caught between these two ladies that were his wife, that he was responsible for, and he was struggling against them. Now, in chapter 32, he's got something new happening. He's going back to the land that he left. Now, God promised him in chapter 28 that that land was his. Esau's name is never mentioned. That land was Jacob's. And so, as he's going, he knows he's got this elephant in the room, Esau. Now, let me tell you something. Jacob solved his problems through craftiness and deceit. He used human ingenuity, right? Well, he bred the sheep a certain way, and they would produce certain things. The guy he was smart, and he had a lot of human sense, and he was always fixing things in his way. So when he comes to Esau, he knows he's got to deal with Esau. He decides he's going to send servants to Esau to say, Jacob, your servant is coming. He wants to see what Esau's going to do. So he sends his servants. The servants come back and say, well, that went great. Esau's so excited to see you, he's coming with 400 men. Now, I don't know about you, but the first thing Jacob is thinking, well, he ain't happy to see me. He's coming with 400 men so he can take back that which rightfully belongs to him in his mind. Right? He's coming to destroy me. He's going to kill me. He's going to destroy my wife. He's going to destroy my children. He's going to destroy my livestock, all my possessions, all my servants. He's going to destroy everything God's blessed me with. So Jacob comes up with an idea. Once again, he's going to solve the problem. He's going to take a bunch of his livestock, donkeys, camels, sheep, all of his livestock, and he's going to send them out in waves with his servants. Wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. And he's going to send them to Esau one at a time to kind of wear Esau down, right? This is from Jacob, your servant. Take it, you know. He's loving you. Please forgive him, basically. Right? And he's sending these out. He's going to do it. He thinks he's got it figured out. But even with that, he's still afraid. So he's going to divide his family up into two parties. So that if Esau attacks one, the other will make it. He still has no faith that Esau is not going to kill him. So he splits them in two parties. he sends half one way, half another way, so that Esau comes upon one group, he may destroy it, but the other ones would be spared. And that night, he takes his wives and his children, and he sends them on in front of him to go camp at another spot. And he's left alone. He is completely and utterly alone, just like he was when he was making his way to his uncle's house. Utterly alone. But there's a difference this time in Genesis chapter 32. Instead of God revealing himself to Jacob, Jacob went to God. So in verse 9, he says to God, God, my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your family, I will deal well with you. I'm not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I've become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me, and the mother with the children. For he said, I will surely treat you well, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. He says to God, he prays for the first time recorded since 28. He says, God, I am unworthy of everything you've done for me. I've been a usurper, a deceiver. I've done a lot of bad things. I don't deserve your blessings that you have given me. And right now, I've got Esau coming with 400 men, and he's going to destroy me. Help me out. Jacob takes his wives, he sends them, and he's left alone completely by himself. When he's there alone, distraught and not knowing what he's going to do, he has no idea what tomorrow holds. God visits him. And God, the Bible says, Jacob wrestled with God. Now, when my kids were little, they liked to wrestle. And when we wrestled, it really wasn't a match. Right? And anytime I wanted to, I could take my 4-year-old, tell him that's enough, and push him off. Right? You dads know what I'm talking about. If you wrestle with your children, you know what I'm talking about. It's not a match. Anytime you want the match to be over, the match is over. Right? So God comes down to Jacob, and they're going to wrestle. All right? Now listen. God is visiting Jacob in a way that Jacob can understand. More than a stairway to heaven, more than a voice from heaven, God sends a physical manifestation. It is a Christophany. He's a pre-appearance of the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, to meet Jacob right where he's at. Now, Jacob is alone. He's afraid. And what has he done? He's confessed that he is undeserving of what God has promised and done for him. He finally is broken. The pride is gone. The arrogance is gone. He now is faced with the real possibility that his brother Esau is going to make good on his threat and kill him and his family and everything that God has given him. So he acknowledges finally, God, I don't deserve anything. He's alone. He's by himself. And so God, hearing his earnest prayer, God, I don't deserve your mercy. God visits him in a way that Jacob can understand. Now let me tell you something. Jacob was not having a wrestling match with God. What was happening is that he grabbed on to God and would not let go. There was no grappling. There was no wrestling. There was no rolling around on the ground. He grabbed a hold of God and said, God, I am not letting go until you bless me. How do I know that? Look to the book of Hosea. Hosea chapter 12, verse 3, talking about Jacob. He took his brother by the heel and the womb, and in his strength he struggled with God. Yes, he struggled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought favor from him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spoke to us. Jacob is reminded of what God promised him in Bethel. He reminds God of the promise. Here, God visits him, and what Hosea tells us is that Jacob was begging God for favor. Begging God to bless him, to have mercy on him. He was not going to let go until God told him everything was going to be okay. He was not going to let go until God changed his circumstance. See, when Jacob left, he left with a rod as a deceiver. He was walking with a staff. That's what he says when he prays to God. I left this place with a staff, and I left with all I had was on my back. Now I'm returning, and you've given me all of this stuff to return with. Keep your promise to me. I know I don't deserve you to keep your promise to me. I haven't earned it. I don't deserve it. But keep your promise. And so he's wrestling with God because God has met him in a way that only he can understand. When you find yourself at the end of your rope and you don't know what you're going to do next, and you don't know where to turn, and you feel like you have no hope, and man has said one thing and all the circumstances are against you, look for God to reveal himself in a way that you can understand.
Amen.
He will meet you at the point of your need. In the case of Jacob, he appeared to Jacob as a man, and he allowed Jacob to grab hold of him to beg him. I imagine Jacob is at his feet, grabbing hold of his ankles, saying, God, have mercy on me. He's holding on to him. Now, at any moment, God could have kicked Jacob off. He's God. He didn't have to move. He could have said, he won the wrestling match, right? At any moment. But God honors Jacob's tenacity and honors Jacob's willingness to hold on to God in spite of everything that's happening around him. I'm not going to let go until you favor me, until you bless me. The question for you and I today is, are you and I willing to struggle with God? Are you and I willing to grab hold of God, to put aside our past, put aside what man has spoken of us, put aside everything that has been against us, and are we willing to hold on to God until he changes us? Because here's the thing. God was about to change Jacob. God wasn't changing for Jacob. God was about to change Jacob. And so when he doesn't just change Jacob's name, he changes who Jacob is, and then he gives Jacob a reminder of this moment for the rest of his life. He says to Jacob's begging, and he says, I'm not letting you go until you show me favor. I'm not letting you go until you bless me.
Yes.
And God says, what do you want? Jacob says, I need you to bless me. Have mercy on me. And God says, all right, I'm changing your name. Your name is no longer going to be deceiver and usurper. Your name is now going to be Israel.
Amen.
Now, what Israel means is one who struggles against God. Did you know that? Or it can mean God's fighter. It says, Jacob, I'm changing your name to Israel because you have struggled against man, and you have struggled against God, and you have prevailed. Man, I don't know if I can articulate this the way it's in my heart. He says, your name is now Israel because you have struggled against man, and you have struggled against God, and you have prevailed. What he's saying here is that you have faced struggle after struggle. Some of your own doing, some of not your own doing. You have struggled against man time and time again. Your latest struggle is against your brother Esau. But you have and will prevail. That's the promise. You're going to prevail against man. Then he said, but you also struggled with me. Now what does that mean? It means that you sought and fought to get my Therefore, I am now changing your name from one who struggled, from deceiver, to now I'm changing to one who has prevailed. You struggle with man, you struggle with me, and you won. You prevailed. You have victory. God changed his name. He changed his name because Jacob was no longer the same person that he was just a little bit before. Amen. He wasn't the same person that he was after just meeting with his uncle Laban. And he wasn't the same person that he was when he divided up his goods into two companies. And then he sent ahead trying to gain favor in the eyes of his brother. At one moment, Jacob was changed. Amen. And God signified the change by changing his name. I don't know about you this morning, but I want to get so hungry for God and his favor. And I want to get so hungry to hold on to God till he changes me. Amen. That I can have my name changed. Amen. Who I am changed. See, God changed his name. Jacob changed the name of the place to Penuel, which means face to face with God. And then God did something else. He touched Jacob's hip. And when he touched Jacob's hip, he gave Jacob a limp. In fact, he literally touched the muscle and took it out of joint, so his hip could never stay in place again. This was a man who was used to doing things his way, his own ingenuity. This was a man who shepherded and managed to get all of the stuff from his father-in-law. This was a self-sufficient man. He had struggled and struggled and struggled. But when he struggled with God, God gave him a limp. His limp was not a weakness. His limp was a trophy. His limp was not a weakness. His limp was a trophy. It was a reminder that his name had been changed from deceiver to Israel, that he had struggled with God and won. Amen. Every time that he stepped and he had to limp, he was reminded that he was not the same person he used to be. Self-sufficient, arrogant, selfish, self-centered Jacob no longer was in control. He was now the Jacob that God had chosen. He was now Israel, Amen. The father of nations. Amen. Right? He was now the one whom God was going to keep his promise to. So that to this day, the name of the people is Israel. They are named after him. Amen. His limp was a trophy that showed that he was no longer who he used to be, but he is now walking in who God called him to be. Wow. He left the deceiver. He returned one in victory. Wow. He prevailed. He left struggling with men. He returned the victor. Amen. So that God delivered on his promise that he made to him when he set out to his uncle in the first place. Amen. But God had to get him to a place where he would recognize he could not do it on his own. Amen. His deceptions were not going to take him any further. His own ingenuity wasn't going to help him out anymore. There was no way to get away from Esau. And he knew that he deserved what Esau wanted to do to him. He knew he deserved it. He had robbed Esau twice. He deserved what he thought Esau wanted to do to him. He had no place to go. Nowhere to turn. Except to turn to God. And when he earnestly prayed to God, forget the rest of the prayer that he prayed. Look at the words, I am unworthy. He must have meant it. Because when he was alone, God came and visited him. Amen. Isn't it awesome that God's promise to us is not based in our worthiness? Amen. Isn't it awesome that God fulfilling his promise to you and I is not based on us being worthy of it? Isn't it awesome that God working out and moving on our behalf in situations and turning things around has nothing to do with who I am and everything that He is?
Amen. Thank God.
How awesome is that? Because if it had to do something with me, I'd be in trouble.
We all would.
Right? If it had something to do with me, I would not have anything. I would have no reason to be happy. I would have no reason to have hope. I would have no reason. Why? Because just like Jacob, I deserve death.
Right. Amen.
Just like Jacob, in my rebelliousness towards God, I deserve punishment.
Right.
But God does not keep His promises based on how worthy I am. He keeps His promises because of how holy He is.
Amen.
And so, when He makes a promise to us, or we call out upon Him, we must remember that He does not answer because of who we are, but because of who He is.
Amen.
When Jacob acknowledged his unworthiness, God met him at the point of his most desperate time of need. Notice his most desperate time of need was not when he was running from Esau. And his most desperate point of need was not when he was being cheated by his uncle. And his most desperate point of need wasn't even when his uncle chased to get to him. And he thought, just take back everything he wanted. His most desperate, oh goodness, I hope I can articulate this. His most desperate point of need was when he was returning to cross into the land that God had promised him.
Amen.
On the edge of the promise was his most desperate point of need. On the edge of God fulfilling that which He promised was where he became the most desperate. It wasn't all the other struggles that he faced. It was that struggle that meant the most. When he struggled with God, and God changed his name from Jacob to Israel on the edge of the promise.
Jesus.
So that when he stepped across into the land that God had promised him and his descendants, Esau welcomed him with open arms, gave him a hug, and said, "Brother, why are you afraid?" His desperate point of need was on the edge. So this morning, if you find yourself on the edge, desperate, say, "I don't know how God is going to fix this. I don't know how I can fix this. There is no hope. I don't have the resources. I don't have the financial resources. I don't have any hope." You're standing on the edge of where you need God, and if God does not intervene, there is no hope, and things will be destroyed.
Jesus.
That's when you're at your most desperate.
Jesus.
And if we're at our most desperate, and we will confess and call upon Him, He will hear you, and He will meet you at the point of your need, just like He did with Jacob.
Amen.
The usurper, the deceiver. Jacob was not a good person. But God had made a promise to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, and it did not matter who Jacob used to be. What mattered is who Jacob wanted him, or who God had for Jacob to be.
Amen.
See, if you're lost in a state of self-pity, feeling you've done too much, feeling like God can never forgive you, feeling like you can never go back and return, God says, if you will acknowledge me, I will forgive you, have mercy upon you, and you can enter into the promise that I have for you.
Amen.
If you're desperate this morning, and you have nowhere else to turn, I'm trusting God that just like He changed Jacob's name to reflect his future, He will make a change for you.
Amen.
That is about your future and not past decisions.
Yes,
Oh,
God.
goodness gracious.
Jesus.
He will change your circumstances. He will make a change in you. That is not about bad decisions in the past, mistakes in the past, but is about what God has for you in the future. Was everything great for Jacob when he entered back? Absolutely not. He still made mistakes. But he was not the same man when he returned as he was when he left. And that's because that night he struggled with God and prevailed. At your desperate spot, how hungry are you?
Wow.
Are you willing to grab hold of God and not let go?
Wow.
Are you willing to go without sleep? Are you willing to go without food? Are you willing to put every distraction aside and be alone? He had to separate himself from everything around him that he was trying to protect. Oh, goodness, that's a whole nother sermon. He had to separate himself from his wives and his children. He sent them ahead. He was by himself because he knew he couldn't do anything to protect them. It was him and God. What are you willing to do to struggle with God and not let go?
Wow.
I don't know about you, but I haven't had many times in my life where I've struggled with God. Where I've tried to grab hold of him and not let go till he answered. I give up. It's not fast enough. It's not happening the way that I wanted it to happen. It's not happening in the timeline that I wanted it to happen. He's not doing what I want him to do, and I let go. See, God is looking for a few people like Jacob who will not quit the first time there's resistance, but will grab a hold of him and not let go regardless of what we see in the natural and what we see in the physical, but to hold on to him and not let go no matter what. Are you willing to grab hold of God? Because when you grab hold of God, things aren't going to be easy. It's a struggle.
Right.
We have a choice to make. Hold on until God answers, or let go and go back to the fear and the worry and the anxiety. Go back to what we left behind. Turn around and go back to the old way, to what we used to be, to what we used to do.
Amen.
That's our choices. Hold on to him and allow God to change us, or let go and go back to what we always were.
Amen.
That's our choices.
Thank you for listening to this message. We hope that you enjoyed it and were blessed by it. Each month we have people from all over the world who listen to the messages made available. If you've been blessed by this ministry, would you consider making a donation of any amount to help support us as we continue to reach the lost for Christ? Donations can be made online at www.reviveoc.org or by check at Revive Outreach Church, 411 Chatham Heights Road, Suite 101, Fredericksburg, Virginia 22405. Thank you for your prayers and your continued support. May God richly bless you.